Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, of course. Hello, welcome. My name is Amy Johnson, and I am stepping in, keeping the seat warm for Michael Spinella this week while he has this Saturday off. And I'm very excited to be here with you as your host for the show for episode 257 of the Canadiens Connection podcast. And of course, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, who is the editor-in-chief, founder, and president of Rocket Sports. That also now includes being the site editor for the Hockey News Montreal team site at thn.com/Montreal. All of that as a big way of saying, hi, Rick Stevens. How are you today?
Hey, Amy Johnson. And hey, Montreal.
Oh, God.
I know. I'm the furthest thing from I don't get country. I don't do country. I don't listen to country, but it's Lasso Montreal this weekend.
Yeehaw.
Yeah.
I live in Pennsylvania.
But don't you wish you were in Montreal this weekend for the country festival?
I'm a little jealous that they get to enjoy a little bit of good old country and western, which is actually quite an American music genre.
But alive and well in Montreal this weekend. And there's going to be lots of Montreal Canadiens at the festival.
We're
watching some big names. Jake Owen, Chris Stapleton, Brothers Osborne.
Brothers Osborne's good.
I don't know any of these people. Lay Hey Babies. Is that that's a group that'll be there.
Okay, I'm not going there. Unfortunately, there are some modern country artists that I like, but I am more of a classic, particularly 90s country, and definitely 80s and a little bit of 70s.
Right in with Charlie Lindgren, as we learned a couple weeks ago.
Well, that's right. We did talk. We talked about that with him a little bit as well. So I do like some of the newer acts. There are those that I like, but I'm a little more of the classic lineup myself. We're going to have a great show for you today. We're going to bring you some of the latest roster news that's been going on. There's some comings and goings and splashes and trades and all sorts of fun things. We're also going to get you updated on some things related to Habs prospects, as well as some general NHL news. And that's all before we dive into our big topic in segment 2, basically looking at what should be our realistic expectations of the Montreal Canadiens in this upcoming season, given that they are going to be a younger roster and lineup. And I think
much younger, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's there's a lot for us to discuss. We're going to take a look at, what the makeup of the roster could and should look like, give a little bit of thought on maybe some early thoughts on what the lines could be looking like, things like that, what the competition is going to be like for the Canadiens this year, all sorts of aspects of that, which is going to be really fun to dive into, kind of whet the appetite a little bit as we get inching closer and closer to September when training camps will start. All of that, of course, then leads to segment 3, where you get to have your say. We'll get you caught up on all of your latest content from around every Rocket Sports platform in case you missed it. We've got a great interview coming up with another one of our team members in the third segment, where Michael Spinella will be hopping into the studio just to chat with one of our team members in the continuation of that series. And then we've got some great comments from our listeners. We've got a new question of the week for our listeners. I'll give you a sneak peek so you can start thinking about it. What do you think was the best player addition or deletion from the roster in this offseason? So start thinking about that. We'll want to hear from you, of course. And if you do want to chat with us, if you've got an answer to the question, if you've got a question of your own or a comment or a suggestion, you can Always remember that this is an interactive podcast. You can text us at any time on the Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. Again, that's 5853-ROCKET. And of course, be sure you're following us on social media. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, visit our website at CanadiensConnection.fm. That's where you'll find our complete archive of episodes just in case you happen to be on vacation or holiday and you missed one and you want to go back and catch up. That's the best way to do that. But as you mentioned, Rick, it is Lasso Montreal this weekend at Parc Jean-Drapeau. Caden Gooley, the Jackeye brothers, they're all going to be there, sporting their best Western gear, I would imagine.
For sure. And Yuri Slafkovsky will be there.
Suzuki's there,
Nick Suzuki,
I think.
Josh Anderson.
Yeah.
Both of the Jackeyes, Florian and Arbor. And if you pop by the Canadiens website, you'll see it's a cute video with Caden Gooley. He's kind of an uncomfortable celebrity, and he was going to a vintage shop where he was getting some Western gear, and he was asked, they had a hat that was of a minor league hockey team, and the attendant asked, is it okay if you wear gear from a different hockey team? He said, yeah, as long as it's not the Leafs.
Good job.
Yeah,
good job.
That was a good answer. And in one outfit, he got dressed up with a kind of a checkered shirt, a vest, and a bolo tie. And he said, you know what? I think I kind of look like my grandpa in this one. Yeah, so I think they're going to have a great time. All the Canadians that get out to Lasso Montreal this weekend, and you probably will too if you're in Montreal.
Absolutely. And grab some extra. I'm sure the food's going to be good too, so grab something tasty. On my behalf, because I won't be able to be there, but we'd love to hear if any of you make it out. There was roster news to talk about this week, including there's been an addition and a deletion on the roster in terms of sponsorships. Ever since its inception, we know that the Broussard practice facility on the South Shore has been known as the Bell Sports Complex. Well, Bell Media no longer the naming sponsor for that building. It will now, effective immediately, in fact, signage should be changed inside and out. If it hasn't been done so already, it's imminently coming. It will be now known as the CN Sports Complex, Canada's largest railway transport company. That's pretty exciting. I think I'll still just call it. They're at Broussard today, but
yeah, probably. Yeah, very few called it the Bell Sports Complex, and but yeah, it's nice to see the CN logo on the front of the building. The CN noodle, the CN ribbon, whatever you prefer to call it. It's been called both, but nice to have a large sponsor like that on for the Broussard facility.
There was also an addition to the scouting staff. So see, not all of the additions and deletions come on the actual playing roster. Sometimes they just happen all over the place. And in this time, it's the amateur scouting staff. Former NHLer Fernando Pisani added on the Canadiens' scouting list.
Yeah, and this is something we've talked about before. Where the Montreal Canadiens webpage, their hockey operations staff, they are often behind in updating, and there's no press release announcing folks that come and go. So this one was noticed. Fernando Pisani is now listed as a scout. An amateur scout added to the group. 46 years old, former NHL player, mostly in Edmonton. Played for the Hamilton Bulldogs, but that's when they were a split affiliation with Hamilton and Montreal. Played for the Oilers, as I said. Has been involved with the Edmonton Oil Kings, the WHL, and then some AAA minor league work. But he is now added to the scouting staff, and folks have noticed Matt Turek no longer there with the Hamilton Bulldogs. Joey Tanute, he scouts the OHL. Andrew Whiteside, an undeclared scout. We're not sure what area he scouts. But Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon promised that they would fill out their hockey operations crew. And, Fernando Pisani is just the latest there.
There was a new official deletion coming off of the Canadiens roster during Kent Hughes' media availability this week when he revealed that, yes, in fact, Paul Byron's playing days have pretty much officially come to an end. There will not be a return to the ice for Paul Byron, which is, I don't think that's the biggest surprise for most people. I think the question now in everyone's minds is, does that mean that Paul Byron is going to stay with the organization and just take on a different role?
Yeah, not a surprise, as you said. Paul Byron's final contract was up at the end of June. I thought Kent Hughes was a little uncomfortable when he was asking these kinds of questions because, as he said, it's preferable that Paul, if it's a retirement announcement that's coming, it's better that Byron makes that announcement on his own. Mm-hmm. But there's obviously a real willingness to have him as part of the organization. As an injured player, the group of injured players usually sit in the press box together, and Paul Byron was there for many games, but oftentimes he was in the press box with Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes and that group watching games at the Bell Center, and perhaps learning that side of the business. So Kent Hughes said that they're going to sit down with Byron sometime in September and try to determine a position with the club.
The reason Kent Hughes had a media availability this week was due to Jeff Petry's trade, which we're going to get to in a minute. But I think whether he intended to or not, there were a number of things that ended up getting revealed in this media availability that were not to do with Jeff Petry's trade whatsoever. Paul Byron's status was one of them. The other, another one, I should say, because there's still more to come. Another was that the team hasn't received any news from the NHL regarding the eligibility of Logan Mailloux to play in the NHL. In fact, the way Kent Hughes worded it, it sounded like Mailloux he didn't say this per se, but it sounded like Mailloux has had a meeting with Gary Bettman and that they're just waiting to hear back from Bettman in the NHL.
Yeah, I think that was the news, small bit of news, but still news that the meeting seems to have happened. We remember Bettman was asked about it and said, he was too busy with the draft and he's too busy with this and that thing, and that he'd get to it, in early July. So sometime it happened. But for whatever reason, and I think it's a poor decision by the NHL, they're not ready to announce that they've given him permission to play just yet. And I think it's going to be, if it happens just prior or even during training camp, then it's going to be, a mass mob of media. It's going to be awful for Mailloux. That is really, really unfortunate that Bettman doesn't foresee, or maybe he wants to put the kid through that. That wouldn't surprise me. But is there any question that he's going to say no? Well, listen, Mailloux already signed a contract, an entry-level contract. That contract would have had to have been approved by the NHL. So I don't think it's an issue of something outstanding, or he's gone through all the hoops that the team is placed in front of him, the NHL and even the OHL. And he's been a model citizen through those steps. So I think it's going to come. It's just going to come with attached with a bit of uncomfortableness for Mailloux, I think.
Which is unfortunate, but hopefully we'll get to a point where we can just start talking about Mailloux and evaluating his hockey.
Right.
So yes, that does bring us to the big reason why Kent Hughes met with the media this week, and that was just 9 days after acquiring Jeff Petry from the Pittsburgh Penguins, a deal in which the Penguins retained 25% of Petry's salary. He has flipped Petry to the Detroit Red Wings for a defensive prospect, Gustav Lindstrom, and a conditional 4th-round pick in 2025, which will be either the later pick of either Detroit or Boston. But the caveat there is that Montreal retains 50% of Petry's remaining salary, which I believe is the next 2 seasons at a little over $2 million a year. So it's quite a mouthful just to flip Jeff Petry, but he's heading off to Detroit, which I think is going to be a good place for he and the family to settle.
For sure. Lots of aspects of this trade, but let's start by hearing from Kent Hughes and how this trade really unfolded.
I called Jeff. I said, listen, I know you didn't go to bed expecting to hear from me this morning. I was probably one of the last people you expected to. And, I know they were, as a family, uptight. They've got four young boys, and they were about to start school in 2 weeks. So I gave him my word. I said, listen, we saw an opportunity here to facilitate the trade between Pittsburgh and San Jose and to help ourselves. But we're mindful that you've got a family and your own career, and Montreal's probably not the place you're expecting to play. So, I promised him that we would work expeditiously to get him moved, and that we wouldn't drag this out trying to maximize every last piece of value in the trade. And it probably took a little longer than we anticipated, but hopefully I spoke with Jeff again, and he was thankful. And I think it's important. We want to build an organization. That doesn't mean we're going to do things that are against the organization's interests, but when we can work together to do what's best for ourselves and the players, we'll always try to do that. And we do hope that over time, players take note and want to be a part of it.
So, as I said, lots of pieces there. But I think it's clear, it should be clear to everybody listening to that, the Petry was a member, again, of the Canadiens for 9 days. And in the mind of Kent Hughes, that is much longer than he had intended that to happen. There wasn't a consideration that they'd add him to the roster. Maybe look to flip him at the trade deadline and maximize that asset. You heard Kent Hughes saying that was not in the cards. And so when it's being painted as this was a charitable thing for Kent Hughes to do, to send him to a place that he wanted to play, Jeff Petry, maybe, yes, partly, but more so, it met the goals of the organization. Because number one, they wanted Petry out of the way to free up spaces for their young defensemen to develop. Number two, they didn't want Petry's cap as it got close to the opening night, and we'll talk about why that's important in a minute. But I think the important part we learned in the press conference is that the reason this came together the way it did, and I should say, this was a complete roll of the dice for Kent Hughes. He became a broker. He became involved in this 3-team trade. Erik Karlsson going to Pittsburgh to facilitate the trade for the other 2 teams and to see if he could roll the dice and get something. If somebody was really desperate needed a puck moving defenseman like Jeff Petry, maybe he could get a decent asset. Didn't play out that way, but it was worth the roll of the dice. However, what he mentioned in the media availability, he was under the impression, Kent Hughes was, that the Canadiens were on Jeff Petry's 15-team no trade list. Mm-hmm. And you might, and that seems reasonable. The Canadiens were not on that list. Why is that? Is that because, he was with the Canadiens? No, those lists are reviewed every July 1st and changes are made. So he didn't, put the Canadiens on that list and say no to it. That way, once Kent Hughes found that out from Kyle Dubas, they were able to be involved. But now the Canadiens, the Kyle Dubas had a problem. He just shifted that problem to Kent Hughes, and Kent Hughes was able to be involved with that and get some assets.
Absolutely. But the question is, what's Petry's reaction to the whole thing? I would think, particularly, they were ready to leave Montreal when that wasn't much of a secret. And going back to Detroit is ideal for them. I love the fact that he has opted to wear his dad's Detroit Tigers number from when Dan was a pitcher for the Tigers. So it's going to be a really memorable time, I think, for Jeff Petry becoming a member of the Detroit Red Wings, and for his whole family, it'll be special. For sure.
I think there's a false narrative out there that the Petrys hated being in Montreal. That wasn't the case. It was specific to the COVID restrictions. It was specific to healthcare, and having extended family close to look after, to help with the childcare of the four boys. So but this scenario is ideal. And it's something we learned from Jeff Petry's presser is that Kent Hughes said, listen, where do you want to go? Asked Jeff Petry, and Petry gave him a list of teams. He said the number one destination on his list was Detroit. He's able to go home. As you said, there's the connection with his dad. That's a really nice story for the Red Wings. And it's also that it fits into the Red Wings rebuild, as they were looking to add a veteran defenseman to that group that they have. Petry gets to possibly play again with Ben Sherratt. They were a pair for a time in Montreal, so that works out. Julie seems happy that there was she posted a picture of a beautiful bouquet of flowers that the women of the Detroit players sent her. I think this worked out for all involved, really. Maybe not the Canadiens in terms of what they were able to get back, as Kent Hughes said. They didn't maximize the value, but they had some other goals in mind too, rather than just maximizing the players and assets in the trade.
Well, one of the pieces that they did get back is young defensive prospect Gustav Lindstrom. He has played the last two seasons solely in the NHL. However, last year only played about half of the games for Detroit. The other half of the games he was a healthy scratch. So it was not the most star-studded year for Gustav Lindstrom. Let's hear just a little bit about from Kent Hughes why this was a guy that they agreed to take back on the Jeff Petry trade.
And as far as Gustav Lindstrom's concerned, our pro guys like him. They feel like he's a really smart puck-moving defenseman. That he still has a lot of room to grow in his game. I think the number that they threw out was he was about 70% of what they believe his potential is. And he's young. He's 24 years of age. He was a high draft pick. He's a Swedish player, and Detroit's had a lot of success in that country over the years, drafting wise. So we're hopeful that Gustav can come and add an element to our team, and we'll see where it takes us.
So I think Kent there is trying to put absolutely the best face on this prospect that they brought back, and saying that he is 70% of the player, in the words of the pro scouts of the Canadiens, 70% of the player that he might be eventually become. Young, that's a question mark. He's 25 years old in October when the season starts. And listen, the Red Wings, if he was a promising prospect, would not have gotten rid of him. They would love to have a young defenseman as well. He just had, in the words of the folks that cover the Detroit Red Wings, he had taken a major step back. As you said, he had only appeared in 36 games last year. He missed 11 games near the start of the season, and when he returned, he was just completely inconsistent. He was in and out of the lineup, and his minutes were cut back considerably, which led to the Red Wings. He was an RFA as of July 1st. The Red Wings did not offer Gustav Lindstrom a qualifying offer. He was signed as an unrestricted free agent. And it was so bad that the Swedish media had reported that Gustav Lindstrom and his agent had made inquiries all over Europe to see about the job possibilities because it hadn't worked out in Detroit, and he was looking to return to Europe for this coming season. So in 36 games last year, he was a -16. His average ice time was about 14 minutes. For 22 games of those 36, he was with Robert Hagg, which they really struggled on the third pair. He was on the ice for 9 goals for, 17 goals against. He wasn't a plus with any partner that he played with. -4 in 13 games with Jordan Osterley. He was a -3 with Olli Mata. And he was even a minus when he played with Moritz Seider. So
Okay.
That's tough. He was a -7 in his last 8 games of the season. He had a rough season. And so, you know, I chuckled when I heard, you know, some places talking about him as a second pair for the, or, you know, in the top 4 for the Canadiens.
No.
I don't think that's going to happen. The one plus he does have. He's a right shot defenseman, and he can move the puck. So that might help him. But just keep in mind that he saw himself playing in Europe, not the National Hockey League this year. So really temper your expectations on this player.
And so when you take all of that into consideration, plus the fact that they're retaining 50% of Petry's salary and include, of course, the conditional 4th round draft pick in 2025. I would say what I have said in this week was that I was overwhelmingly positive about the first part of this whole deal, the 3-team trade, the acquiring Jeff Petry, getting Mike Hoffman off the books, Rem Pitlick out, that kind of thing. I was a bit underwhelmed with this, with the flip and retaining 50% of salary and what he got back.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And there's good parts and bad parts to this trade. You know, a lot. It's great that Mike Hoffman was moved, and it's great that on paper, Mike Hoffman was moved without retaining any salary.
Yeah.
But when you look at it overall, and Jeff Petry was in and out, that $4.5 million that was due to Mike Hoffman this year is really just it's 2.35 for Petry this year and next year is there it is. So it didn't really work out that Mike Hoffman was moved without salary retention. Is almost 100% in this case split over 2 years. I really don't like the fact that there's salary retention for 2 years, for the next 2 years. And we remember it's $2.34 million because Pittsburgh has a chunk of that, 25%, and then the Canadiens have 50%. So a great deal for Detroit.
Detroit made out really well.
Absolutely. But when you look at the money that's going to Petry, we remember there was salary retention on Joel Edmondson, and there's dead cap money for Carl Alsner. That's $5 million dead money on the cap this season. And there's also, what bothers me a little bit is the retention slots. You're only allowed to retain salary on 3 contracts. The Canadiens have used 2 already this season in Edmondson and Petry. So if you're expecting, when there's trades going to happen at the trade deadline, you expect the Canadiens would want to be involved with that. You would expect that other teams would want the Canadiens to retain salary. They only have 1 left this year, and they've already used one next year. Excuse me. And the thing that bothers me a little bit about next year is that you're looking at expiring contracts. Christian Dvorak, Yoel Armia, Jake Allen, David Savard are all on expiring contracts next year. And if the Canadiens are sellers, which they probably will be in 2024-25, there's only 2 retention spots available. In it, the cap is one thing, and maybe you don't think that 2.35 is a bad deal, but it's those retention slots that are going to come into play, and that's tough. Casey DeSmith is the other part of this, and involved in the big picture. And one of the things that was came out is we were expecting that this was going to provide some flexibility, some options if Caden Primo was taken when put on waivers and sent to Laval, and so then maybe Casey DeSmith could go to Laval. One thing in that presser that Ken Hughes said that surprised a number of people was that Ken Hughes reached out to Casey DeSmith and said, "Don't worry, we're not going to bury you in Laval." So
you might go to another team.
Yeah, there's something else that's going to happen there with Casey DeSmith. And again, this was part of taking on other teams' problems in order to get the real asset here is the second round pick in 2025, to a lesser extent the fourth round pick. But that second round pick is the best part of the trade for the Canadiens.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's switch gears now a little bit. And we've talked about kind of some of the veterans that have been on the roster. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of Habs prospects.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world. Bookmark thn.com/Montreal to follow our comprehensive coverage of Canadiens prospects.
First up, the ECHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, the Trois-Rivières Lions, have signed 2 more forwards this week. That is Joseph Mizzi and Matthew Boucher.
And if you want the information on all the signings of the Trois-Rivières Lions, head to thn.com/Montreal. Chris G will have an article out about those signings.
Excellent. Always good to see those. As far as the AHL is concerned, Scott Wheeler has a new article out at The Athletic where he talks a bit about NHL prospects that he was wrong about. And interestingly enough, there is a Canadiens prospect in that line. Actually, he has 2 listed, but the one that we're going to talk about is Jan Mysak. And he talks about how Jan Mysak, he loves Jan Mysak's play every time he sees him, and he doesn't understand why what he has seen him do hasn't translated into bigger numbers and a bigger role and that type of thing. And Rick, I know that you're going to have plenty to say about this. My reaction once I read what Scott Wheeler had to say was, if what happens in Laval would be giving more priority to time, confidence, and space for the young prospects to step up and succeed, then I don't think Jan Mysak would be in the situation that he's in.
It's funny reading it. Alan McShane is the other one.
Yeah.
But he's more of a standard. I was wrong. I think he was wrong on Alan McShane.
Yeah.
This one, Scott Wheeler said he's stumped. He's completely confounded. He doesn't understand. He says, and he said, there's no lesson for me here because every time, I'll quote him, quote, virtually every time I've been in a rink to watch Jan Mysak in the OHL, World Juniors, Memorial Cup, rookie tournaments, and even in the AHL, I've seen an impressive player who works hard, has plenty of skill, and looks to me like a better prospect and player than his numbers in the 3 seasons since he was selected. Even when yes, the tape and some of the tracking that's been done all support my belief. He plays hard. He plays a translatable style, and it just hasn't clicked in the AHL. And he can't understand it. He's like, I had this in the final draft ranking. He had Jan Mysak as 12. He praised the Canadiens all over for picking him up at 48 in 2020. And it hasn't happened. And what Scott doesn't know is this is something we've been talking about for a while.
It's so frustrating.
And listen, we just have to be frank. We're going to be honest. This is poor coaching in Laval. This is poor development by the organization with respect to Jan Mysak. And this is something that has to change and has to change drastically. Coaching staff in Laval has prioritized veterans, popular players, and Jan Mysak hasn't got the ice time. He's been a healthy scratch far too often, and he hasn't been given the responsibility. He's in a very effective defensive-minded forward who can shut down play. He needs more time on the face-offs in big moments. He needs time on the penalty kill. He needs an opportunity to show his offensive side as well. This is fascinating because Scott is just confused here because everything points in the direction of this player having success, and the only thing in that's an obstacle is the coaching, and let's hope that changes because there's going to be a ton of prospects in Laval this season.
And, being a healthy scratch, coming in and out of the lineup, being pushed farther down in the lineup when you do play, not getting all of the opportunities and so forth. I've heard people, whether it's fans, whether it's media, I've heard people use he doesn't work hard enough. I don't know what is it in practice or off ice or whatever it is. And my response to that is we know that every prospect is different and approaches their development differently. And it's quite possible, I can't say this definitively because I haven't had a conversation with Jan Mysak about this specific topic, but it's quite possible, we've seen it happen before, that because of all of the instability and the unsure of when you're playing, where you're going to play, how long am I in the press box, that kind of thing, it strips a young player's confidence. And that confidence can then that lack of confidence or reduction in confidence can then snowball into what kind of an effort they make in practice, or what kind of an effort they make or their attitude off the ice, if they feel like no matter what they do, they can't get ahead and that type of thing. I'm not saying that's what's happening here. That is my best educated guess as to what is possibly one factor that's contributing to this situation, but that's what's got to change.
Yeah, if those comments are being made, they're nonsense, because the player that I've seen play works hard, practices hard. I'll read it again from Scott Wheeler. He said, I've seen an impressive player who works hard. And then a little later he said he plays hard, plays a translatable style. It's simply the fact of, he's not a popular player. He's not he's delightful when you interview him, but maybe hasn't grabbed the charm of the Laval fans. But Laval is not there to develop an Alex Belzile. Fortunately, he's gone, or similar types of players. They need to develop the prospects they have, and I want to see a whole lot more of that this season.
Absolutely. Don't forget, you can find all of our content and coverage about the Laval Rocket and Habs prospects by bookmarking thn.com/Montreal. I will be back on the beat for the Laval Rocket once again this season, as I've been doing since 2015, back when they were the St. John's Ice Caps. And of course, Chris G will be back on the beat as well. So
Patrick Williams.
And Patrick Williams will be there as well. Of course, he joins me. Right now in the summer, we're on the every other week schedule, but come the season, we'll be back on the weekly schedule for the Press Home podcast, where Patrick comes and gives us his insight on the AHL and the Laval Rockets. So be sure to bookmark thn.com/Montreal. Just touching on a couple of other NHL-related news items before we take our first break. Jonathan Toews, former Blackhawks captain, coming out this week, not making a retirement announcement, but making an off-season announcement that looked a whole lot like the one he made last year, where he needed to tell his fans and followers that he once again is stepping away from hockey. It doesn't sound like he has plans to play this season. His struggles with just his physical recovery and recovery in general from dealing with long COVID and things of that nature over the last couple seasons seems to be continuing. And so he still needs some time away from the game, but was sure to mention that it's not a retirement announcement, but we likely won't expect to see him this season.
No, and that's really sad. He also mentioned that there is a story to tell about long COVID and his experience with it, and that will come at a later time. We know that he's an unrestricted free agent, and it was sad to see him leave the Chicago Blackhawks, but we'd like to see him get back on the ice, the kind of player that he is with some team sometime in the future.
In unfortunate news to have to pass along, four-time Stanley Cup champion Bobby Baun from the Toronto Maple Leafs passed away at age 86. It's Bobby Baun, of course, as we said, four Stanley Cups to his name. I know the Habs like to rib the Leafs on how long it's been since their last Stanley Cup, but Bobby Baun was part of 4 Stanley Cup winning teams. But Rick, there's a Canadiens connection to make here.
Well, there is. And first, I just want to say that when you talk about toughness, there was none tougher than Bobby Baun. And we remember the famous story about blocking a shot, breaking his leg, getting carted off the ice, and then getting taped up and coming back and scoring I believe it was a series-winning goal, maybe even the Stanley Cup winning goal for the Leafs. And a lot of that toughness and that grit was passed on to Kyle Baun. And we remember Kyle, that's Bobby Baun's grandson. We remember Kyle Baun as a member of the Laval Rocket in the 2017-18 season. And he was just an all-around great player, really strong and gritty and tough along the boards. And so for Kyle and the rest of the Bobby Baun family, we send our condolences.
Absolutely. Speaking of condolences, we also would like to pass along condolences to the family of Carrie and Angela Price while they're unfortunately mourning the passing of Angela's father.
Yeah, Angela posted a picture of her embracing her dad at her wedding with Carrie. Just behind, and she said, "Yesterday we lost my dad. Words cannot express the immense love and gratitude I have for this amazing man. He provided me with the most wonderful childhood, filled with love, laughter, and cherished memories. As I navigate this new chapter without him, I hold on to the lessons he taught me and the legacy he leaves behind. Forever grateful for the time we shared and the impact he made on my life. Rest in peace, Dad. You'll be deeply missed, but your love will forever live on in my heart." Beautiful, beautiful message from Angela Price.
Absolutely. And our thoughts and condolences to the Price family as well. We are going to take our first break here at the Canadiens Connection podcast. Still to come, of course, we'll tackle that question of the week. Remember, we were asking who has been your favorite addition and or deletion from the Canadiens roster in this offseason. And so we're going to read some of those comments and collect those all, of course. Be sure to leave comments at Rocket Sports on Twitter or at Rocket Sports on Facebook. But of course, coming up next in our big topic segment, we are going to discuss the fact that the Montreal Canadiens are going to be much younger in the upcoming season. And let's talk about what some realistic expectations should be for this team and this roster in the 2023-24 season. That is all coming up right after we hear from our sponsors over at DraftKings. So stay with us. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
New customers download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. Bet just $5 to score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, KS. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casinos at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 and over in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10-plus leg requisite for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, I'm Amy Johnson, your host for today's show, while Michael Spinella is out of the office today. You can find me on Twitter at FlyersRule. And of course, with me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports and the site editor for the Hockey News Montreal team site, Rick Stevens. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Rocket Sports. While you're at it, just follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Bookmark our website at canadiensconnection.fm. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the Canadiens Connection podcast right there in your player or on your favorite podcast app. You know, we do like to mention and say, of course, that we are a proud affiliate of the Hockey Podcast Network. And of course, that's the spot that you just heard from our sponsors over at DraftKings. Those incentives come courtesy of being an affiliate of the Hockey Podcast Network. Just want to give a big shout out to the network in general. The Hockey Podcast Network hitting a big milestone this past week. Now 100 podcast shows strong. That's right, 100 different podcasts available on the Hockey Podcast Network, including this podcast, The Canadiens Connection, as well as our AHL and Laval Rocket focused podcast, The Press Zone, which I host on Tuesdays. All of it, big congratulations. It's grown and expanded into such a big network, and just a big congratulations to all of the podcast producers and creators that are involved with the network. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we've been part of the Hockey Podcast Network for about 3.5 years, heading in to the 4th year in the fall, and it's been terrific. The connections that we've made through the podcast network, the folks that manage it, and there are some very, very good podcasts on the network. Of course, we're partial. We like the Canadiens Connection. We like the Press Zone, and folks seem to like us too.
That is true. Hey, speaking of the Hockey Podcast Network, while you're at it, if you check out their YouTube channel, they just did a special show that was an Atlantic Division preview for the upcoming season. And our very own Michael Spinella was repping the Montreal Canadiens coverage on that episode. He was there representing Rocket Sports, Canadiens Connection podcast, and giving his thoughts and insight on the Montreal Canadiens in terms of the entire Atlantic Division. So be sure to go check that out. He did a great job, and would love for everybody to catch that.
Yep.
All right. So with Jeff Petry having been reacquired and shipped out again in the luxuriously long length of time of 9 days. Some people are very quick to maybe consider that the Canadiens are getting close to that 23-man roster to start the season. But we do still have to keep in mind that there are a lot of decisions left to be made, and perhaps not every move has been made yet. There's still some things in play. Training camp is going to come along. It is going to be an exceptionally competitive training camp for a core group of players. And while we probably won't see any more surprising additions coming over the next month, there could be some deletions off the roster. There might be some minor moves that Kent Hughes makes, that a player or two moves out. So some things to keep an eye on. Just as a reminder, who are the major additions and deletions so far in this offseason? Well, first coming in has been Alex Newhook, Lias Andersson, and Gustav Lindstrom. The first, of course, being forwards, the third being a defenseman. Leaving the organization has been Joel Edmondson, Jonathan Drouin, Mike Hoffman, and Rem Pitlick. So those are the major ins and outs as far as the roster goes for the offseason.
And I think, as we've talked about in previous weeks on this podcast, the progression, the fact that most people are saying that this squad will be a little bit better, marginally better than last year, is because of the deletions, not necessarily the additions. And the Canadiens will get younger. Veterans like Joel Edmondson, Mike Hoffman, Jonathan Drouin. But those were also the players who, were on the minus side. And the Canadiens should be better because they are no longer part of this squad. You mentioned a couple of different names as far as additions, and the only major one really is Alex Newhook, and Alex Newhook is Kirby Dach 2023.
Yes,
a young player who has been underwhelming in the NHL, and the Canadiens are looking a high draft pick, and looking to turn his fortunes around and help him reach his potential. But this roster is going to be younger. And I read somewhere that it's, out of the roster, the 23-man roster, there could be as many as 11 players who are 24 years and younger. That's going to be the major feature of this team.
Absolutely. I might have even seen a graphic somewhere that had the Canadiens as like the 5th youngest in the league for this coming season or something like that.
All right.
It's going to be pretty young. So that is, and I should say that goes along with saying, and that's a good thing because that is what they need to be doing at this stage of the rebuild. The roster needs to be young, and these young players have to find their role, find their quote unquote voice on the ice within the team, find out what it is, figure out what they are going to bring to each and every game, make the mistakes they need to make, learn from them, and start to become a cohesive unit, a well-oiled machine that learns how to work together through good times and bad on the ice and off, as they slowly start to build that experience that in another few years could turn them into a team that's actually a contender. So that's what we want to see. Now, in terms of cap space for the coming year, the Habs are approximately $3 million over the cap, but instead of spending up as they did last year, we talked about how Kent Hughes revealed a number of things in this media availability he did about the Petry trade, and one of the big ones was that he made it pretty clear that the goal is to be cap compliant with Carey Price's salary included. That means not putting him on LTIR in the offseason, but that means putting him on in-season LTIR. In fact, Kent Hughes, here's what he had to say about the cap situation for the Canadiens this upcoming season.
Well, we often have discussions, which we did the year before too, and opted against it, which is to avoid going into off-season LTI. Because when you do that, even if we, use $2 million or $1.5 million, let's say, if we put Carey Price on off-season LTI, his money's gone. And then we lose the flexibility during the year, which we did last year, right? Where with all the injuries and the recalls and bonus money, we get into overages, which carry the cap costs into the following year. So with each passing year, we're going to be more and more mindful wherever we can to try not to do that and to preserve Carey. The unfortunate part is when we bring Carey we don't put him on LTI until in season. It's pretty hard to use $10.5 million of his money in season. So LTI isn't a perfect situation for any team. I know some people think it's simple and you just use the money that player's salary was occupied, but it's a little bit more complicated. Having said that, if we find opportunities again to, like we did the last time around with Sean Monahan, where we think it's worthwhile, we'll do it and put ourselves in off-season LTI. But we think as of right now, we're safe to go in season with Carey.
So like my piano teacher, Mrs. Burzis, used to say to me, after she explained something, clear as mud.
Clear as mud,
I'd
right?
shake my head, yes. I didn't know what she was talking about. Kent Hughes, maybe not the best explanation there, but it's a really complicated issue, and we're not going to take the time to explain all the ins and outs of it. Simply that last year they put Carey Price's salary, $10.5 million, in off-season LTIR. In that way, they were able to make the deal for Sean Monahan and bring in that big chunk of salary and make use of it. And they spent right up to that $10 million mark and made full use of it, so that Carey's money was kind of irrelevant. It didn't affect the bottom line of the Canadiens last year, and in fact, insurance paid a lot of it, so it didn't even really affect the budget that much. But the problem with that is then you're maxed out, having spent all that $10 million. And so if there are overages, and overages come in the case of somebody meeting their bonus, their performance bonuses in their contract, then you go over the cap, and that's taken out of the cap from the following year. So ideally, and what the goal is this year, is to account for Carey in the in-season, in the final roster, have his 10.5 included in that. And that way that they can then, once the season starts, put Carey Price. Actually, it's once the roster. It's not exactly when the season starts. It's a little before that, when the roster, the final roster gets submitted. Then Carey's put on in-season long-term injured reserve, and they have the flexibility of using up to $10 million. As he said, they're probably not. They likely won't use all of it, but at least there won't. That will account for any kind of cap overages or bonuses, performance bonuses, or that sort of thing. Problem with that is that right now they're sitting at about $3.5 million over the cap when you include Carey's money. So in order to have him on in-season LTIR, they're going to have to somehow shed about $3.5 million. And there's a number of ways to do that. One of them is sending players who are waiver exempt on paper. They did it with Arber Xhekaj just before the season last year. Arber Xhekaj was going to be in the opening night roster, but they sent him to Laval on paper, so his salary wasn't counted and all that sort of thing. So that may happen, or there may be some trade. We talked about Casey DeSmith moving some of that money out. I think it's $1.8 million. That would get you halfway to what you need. So there's going to be some minor moves coming. Does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense.
Clear as mud.
I know, clear as mud, exactly.
So when it comes to how competitive this young Canadiens team will be this year, I know that a lot of fans, I think there were still, I was pleased to see last year that there were still a number of fans who were adamant that there was no rush to get the team back to being a playoff contender in the immediate future. That they understood that there needed to be more time for learning and rebuilding and so forth. However, when they would, when you see Cole Caulfield doing what he was doing in the first part of the season, or Nick Suzuki playing well, it's easy for fans to get excited about the what ifs and the possibilities, and maybe the Canadiens are going to make the playoffs next year. When it comes to the Atlantic Division, it's a really tough division. It really is. And while, yes, the Canadiens have definitely made some positive changes to the roster in terms of who they've added and who they've deleted. They are still facing a really big uphill battle in terms of positioning within the Atlantic Division, and Kent Hughes was certainly not shy to say the same thing.
Well, listen, we do have an overly competitive division, or uber competitive, and I don't think that's going to change here in the near future. I think it has been for some time if you really look at it, right, where for a period of years you had Tampa, Boston, and Toronto. It's not like any of those teams are going anywhere, and now we've got the Buffaloes and Detroits and Ottawas and Montreals, trying to knock the door down here and climb into a top 3 spot in the division. Do I think we're ready? I think on paper the answer is no. But I think I said that last year at the start of the season. I'm an optimist, and we're going to let things play out, and there's a reason they play the games, and I think we're a better team this year than we were last year, but we've got a lot of work to do to become the team that we think we need to be.
So we understand that Canadiens fans are very hungry for a playoff team, mm-hmm. and that was reinforced when I read something this year that says that the Canadiens have not qualified for the playoffs in a full season of play in the Atlantic Division since the 2016-17 season. Now, we remember the playoff run in the COVID year. We remember the play-in round against Pittsburgh and then losing to the Flyers, but that was a shortened season as well. So they have not made the playoffs in a full season since 2016-17. So you can understand the feeling that they want to see their team in the playoffs. Kent Hughes is saying on paper, no, that's unlikely to happen. Tampa, Boston, Toronto are still there, and teams like Buffalo, like Detroit, like Ottawa, they're also in a rebuild, but that rebuild is further ahead than Montreal's. So will they improve this year? Especially if they don't suffer the number of injuries they did last year, for sure.
Probably, yeah.
Are they a bottom 5 team again? No. Are they a bottom 10 team? I think
maybe.
I don't think they'll be anywhere near the playoffs, but probably in the bottom 10 of the NHL.
Just have to wait. As he said, they play the games for a reason. So Ken Hughes likes to be an optimist, but he's also, it's interesting. There's a difference between being an optimist and a realist, and you can be both things at the same time. And I think that's kind of the mode that Kent Hughes was putting forward there. All right. So we've talked a lot about everything surrounding the roster, but what actually happens, what it comes to winning and losing games, it's all about the roster and who's playing on the ice. So at this stage in the game, we know, obviously, as we've said a couple of times now, there could be some moves, maybe to move some guys out. But as it stands right now, if you're looking for a 23-man roster, starting with the forwards, here's who we should expect to see. I'm going to run through the list just to give everyone a reminder, and then, Rick, we can talk a little bit about what that makeup is. We've got Suzuki, Caulfield, Newhook, Doc, Anderson, Monahan, Armia, Slafkovsky, Gallagher, Ullinen, Evans, Harvey Pinard, Pezzetta, and then one of Sean Farrell, Owen Beck, Lias Anderson, or Emil Heineman.
And that gets us to 14. One of that grouping on the bottom plus the other 13. One name you didn't mention is Christian Dvorak. We assume that he won't be ready to start. He'll be back this season, but he won't be ready to start the season. So he'll likely start the season on the injury list with Carey Price. But pick one of Sean Farrell, Owen Beck, Lias Anderson, and Emil Heineman, and you have a 14-man forward roster right there.
Absolutely. And I'll give my, when we talk, the next thing we're going to talk about once we do this is talking about what potential lines could look like. And so I'll give my thoughts on who that extra person could be at that point. Moving to the back end, the defensemen, we've got Matheson, Gooley, Savard, Harris, Jackeye, Kovacevic, and one of Chris Weidman, Justin Barron, or Gustav Lindstrom.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Gustav Lindstrom is going to be an extra defenseman, probably behind Kovacevic. Chris Weidman, a real good utility player and a nice guy to have around, really good guy in the locker room. He might be their choice as the seventh defenseman, although he would look pretty good in Laval too, being a leader down there. Justin Barron, love to see Justin Barron part of this group, particularly to give him the opportunity. He looked pretty good when he was in the lineup. He spent most of the season in Laval, but looked good when he was called up. And he's a right-handed or a right-shot defenseman, which the Canadiens value, of course.
Absolutely. And your two goaltenders are Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault. Obviously, we know it's a question mark around what's happening with Casey DeSmith and a question mark as to what will happen with Caden Primo as he is waiver eligible. So those are your two goaltenders.
So we get the goaltenders out of the way before we get to the lines. Imagine that Primo is claimed on waivers or goes down to Laval, and that Casey DeSmith is, as Kent promised, not buried in Laval, and he's traded away. In Laval, what does that mean for Laval? Well, Jakob Dobas, coming out of college, it would be his first pro season. Strauss-Mann, who has he's experienced, and Zach Eman, who's probably destined to head to Trois-Rivières, but available for a call-up as well.
So what could the lines and defense pairings look like? We're going to focus, that's what we're going to focus on right now is the skaters today. What could the lines and defense pairings look like on opening night? Well, they could look like this. And I think Rick and I actually spoke a bit about that. We're not going to each present our own lines and defense pairings because we actually spoke at length about this prior to recording the show today. And most of this, we were pretty much on the same thinking line of thought on. So we just kind of collectively came up with, here's the lines and defense pairings. If there's anything that either one of us differs on, we'll just point that out individually. So a top line of Caulfield, Suzuki, and Newhook, which Rick, I think for what they gave up to get Alex Newhook, he better be on the first line.
Well, that's a good point. Suzuki and Caulfield are going to be together. It's been difficult to find someone to play with them and offer them what they need. Josh Anderson's been tried there many times. That hasn't worked. I think Newhook may work, and he's comfortable at both center and the wing. Newhook may work on that line given his speed. Tremendous amount of speed, and that would be a real asset on that line. Also, he's a center, so he's comfortable with the defensive responsibilities of a center. And Suzuki, his defensive metrics haven't been good. So I think this is a line that could work. And as you said, if they're wanting to give an opportunity to Newhook to show his potential, what better place than on the first line?
Continuing on, and the caveat is that we're going under the assumption that Christian Dvorak will not be ready to start the season. So I'll have a comment about the lines with Devo in it once we get through this. So this is kind of opening night. Dvorak is still injured. Second line would be Armia, Doc, Anderson. And I firmly believe Kirby Doc should just be stapled into the center position. And a second line center behind Suzuki is just the spot for him. Don't put him on the wing again. Leave him at second line center. I think that's the perfect spot for him. And I think Armia and Anderson could certainly be beneficial on his wing.
Yeah, I really like this line. You're right about Doc playing center. fans kind of liked seeing him with Suzuki and Caulfield, and he did well, and mostly because he was responsible in a defensive way and made up for Caulfield. I think Newhook can do that just fine. And Kirby Dach really came into his own and really showed his value when he played center. These are some big boys, and they could push another line around. Anderson, speed, forecheck. Kirby Dach, not afraid to mix things up. Armia might be a surprise, but Armia is really good on the boards and could feed those two. Again, I think this changes. I'd had considered Monahan because I really liked Monahan on the wing beside Dach. I liked how Monahan and Dach played together. But with Dvorak out, we're going to need Sean Monahan to play center.
Right. And so that brings us to the third line with Slafkovsky, Monahan, and Gallagher. Here I am also in agreement with you here that Slafkovsky starts down on at least the third line. I think we need to remember that Slafkovsky has actually not played a lot of NHL games. And I think that he is not ready to take a top six position yet. I think he needs to grow into that position, and I absolutely believe that putting him in a bottom six position is the right way to get him started this season.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of projections with Slafkovsky up on the second line. It's not going to, in my opinion, it shouldn't happen. Why? Because he really had trouble in the few games, as you said, that he played in the NHL, processing the game at speed. We saw the number of hits he took, and the game was moving way too fast for him. So starting at the third, maybe even the fourth line, and listen, if he's improved, if he processes quicker, if he has a better hockey IQ, then you can move him up into Armia's spot. He'd be fine on that line. And again, it would be a line of physical players. But I want to see Slafkovsky eased into it. Third line is probably best for him, and especially because he would be covered by the veteran presence of a Monahan and a Brendan Gallagher.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So that leaves your fourth line of Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Jake Evans, and Jesse Ylönen. I'm firmly on board with this. I have been quite vocal in saying Jesse Ylönen absolutely 100% deserves a spot on this roster. And Harvey-Pinard has certainly shown his mettle in terms of playing in the NHL. And so if you want to give them, if there was only going to be one of them selected, I will go with Ylönen, not only for where he is at in his development, but also because of the fact that he is waiver eligible. Raphael Harvey-Pinard is waiver exempt, and so you would never want to risk losing Ylönen to a waiver claim, whereas Raphael Harvey-Pinard, you won't have to worry about that this year. And Jake Evans is just a solid fourth line center, does a very good job back there centering that line.
This line makes a whole lot of sense. One, because Harvey-Pinard and Ylönen played together for a time in Laval, but also because Ylönen and Evans are tremendous skaters. Both are strong skaters and with speed. Harvey-Pinard not, but he can be the guy who goes to the front of the net. And he's a fan favorite, but was higher in the lineup than he should have been last year, especially with all the injuries that the Canadiens suffered. So this, I think, would be a little bit of skill and a lot of energy on that fourth line.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I would agree with you there. Now, I will say that I agree with you. Once Christian Dvorak comes back into the fold, he obviously slots into that third line center role for me, which would, I agree with you, push Monahan back to the wing on the second line. He and Dach work very well together. And it might then shift Armia and Slafkovsky down a little bit in the lineup. And that means then at that point, maybe it's a Harvey-Pinard that goes down to Laval since he can come back and forth at free will. So
that's right. And there's going to be injuries and all of that. Now, those are the 12 players of the 14 forwards. That would mean that Elias Anderson and Michael Pezzetta are scratched, the extra forwards. So maybe it's not Harvey Pinard, maybe it's Anderson that goes down. But as you said, Harvey Pinard has the freedom to be waiver exempt, so he can come and go as he pleases. But there may be a game where Ylönen has to sit against a tougher lineup, and Pezzetta's in there.
Right, absolutely. And when we talked just a moment ago about who the one of Michael Pezzetta is obviously going to be your 13th forward. And then one of Sean Farrell, Owen Beck, Elias Anderson, Emil Heineman. For me, I would like to see that be whittled down to being a race between Owen Beck and Emil Heineman. Sean Farrell, I believe, will be in Laval. And Elias Anderson, I would like to see what he can do. He's performed very well in the AHL. I don't know that he basically I want to see what he does at training camp, but Owen Beck is an option of he either plays in the NHL or he has to go back to the OHL, where I think he's not well served to go back there. He doesn't have a Laval option.
Yeah, just a point on that, and it was brought up by one of our colleagues on the team, Rocket Sports team, Mike Raschel.
Yes.
He would go back to Peterborough. The Peterborough Petes, and in their run to the Memorial Cup, they were all in. So the team that's left for this season is not going to be competitive, and that wouldn't serve Owen Beck very well to go back in that situation. So the Canadiens would want, as Mike says, some sort of commitment that he's dealt to a more competitive team to help his development. Otherwise, it only then makes sense for him to be added to the roster. Sean Farrell was added at the end of the season, kind of against the wishes of Marty St. Louis, which didn't look too good there. But Sean Farrell did look good and would offer some offense to I think that's one of the issues with this particular lineup is a lack of offensive firepower. So Sean Farrell would help there. Emil Heineman has been terrific in Laval for the short time that he's spent
up in the AHL.
Yeah, absolutely. He could steal a spot easily.
Absolutely. So for me, I think that extra spot, if it were up to me, it would come down to Owen Beck and Emil Heineman. So we'll just have to see how that all shakes out. If we go to the blue line now, taking a look at the top pairing, Caden Gooley, David Savard. And I don't think, I mean, how can you argue with that? Caden Gooley is your top young defensive prospect, and David Savard is a very steady, reliable, good mentor to have next to him on the top pair.
Caden Gooley played exceptionally well with David Savard last year. Those two as the top pairing, solid, reliable. Caden Gooley would be the guy who's would play the offensive role. That's why I see, some of the projections have him with Matheson, Gooley playing his wrong side. I don't like that. I also don't like that Gooley would defer to Matheson for providing the offense. So I like Gooley and Savard together, and Gooley's going to be the number one defenseman on the top pairing throughout his career. Why not give him that responsibility now?
And that would put Mike Matheson on a second pairing with Justin Barron, which I think is a much better matchup. As you had mentioned a few moments ago, Justin Barron obviously and absolutely showed what he could do at the NHL level when he was brought up for that short stint at the end of last season. And he really opened up when he came up to the NHL. Sometimes there was a bit of hesitancy with him while playing in Laval, and I think some of that was just due to uncertainty of role or where he was played or how often he was played. But he really confidently came into the NHL, and I would like to see him stay there and continue on that trajectory. Yeah,
and being paired with a Mike Matheson, who he can follow and learn. I really want. I know that Byron can go to the AHL this season, but I'd really like to see him be given the responsibility. Yep. and let it be a Chris Weidman, or a Gustav Lindstrom that heads to Laval instead.
And of course, that also means, let's not forget about Jordan Harris rounding out the third pairing with Jonathan Kovacevic. I think in terms of rebuilding, there is also team building. And I think if you have the three young guns there, Gooley, Byron, and Harris, as the three youngest prospects on that back end for the Montreal Canadiens, I think that the three of them are going to start really bonding together off ice and in the locker room as well. And I think that could be the start of a very nice core with those three as they develop together. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. But yes, Harris and Kovacevic as your third pairing.
Yeah, and in my model, I see Kovacevic as the seventh defenseman, and he'd be on a rotation with Arber Xhekaj. And so many nights Arber Xhekaj would be in there. Kovacevic did really well when picked up on waivers from Winnipeg last year, but not part of your long-term plan, so he can afford to sit for times. I think people forget about Jordan Harris, and I saw during the summer. Many trades included him as kind of a throw-in, and I think at times he was the Canadiens' second best defenseman last year. He really showed how he can move the puck, and also he's super smart and he knows how to defend. Doesn't have the size to do that, but he has the smarts to be able to put himself in a position to defend. So
plays a very mature game.
Yeah, absolutely. He's also very mature. He's a leader, and he had that role in college as a leader, and he's brought that to the Canadiens as well. So Harris, some combination of Harris, Kovacevic, and Xhekaj on the third pairing.
So there you have it. That's that. And as we said, that's going to leave a couple of scratches, a couple of extra guys who are going to rotate in and out. But that's kind of, as I said, we agreed on most of our lines. So kind of went along with what you had originally drawn up here and just gave our opinions here and there as to other things that could happen. But that's what we feel at this moment. Now, granted, there might be some of those guys still could get shipped out. We don't know. But at this moment, that could be an early look at how things shape out for the Habs for this coming season. And I don't know about you, I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I should say, this isn't what we think. We're not predicting or we're not pretending to know what Marty St. Louis, what's in his mind or Kent Hughes. This is what we think is best for the team, for the long-term future of the team, and for the rebuild, for the prospects involved.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear what you think, too. If you've got a different opinion, feel free to drop us a comment. You can leave us a text at the text line, 585-3-ROCKET, or, of course, leave us a comment on Facebook or Twitter at Habs Connection. And so what we're actually going to do right now is we're going to take our final break. Up next, we're going to read your replies to the question of the week. We're going to hear some of your feedback. We've got a great Rocket Sports team member interview coming up, continuing that series, and you won't want to miss it. Nathan is in the hot seat this week. We can't wait to hear from him. So stay with us. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
It's summertime, and it means that, of course, it's music listening time, whether you are chilling at the beach or at the lake or at the cottage, even in your backyard, out for a walk or a jog, or driving and cruising with the windows down or the top down if you're lucky enough to have a convertible. It is summer music season. What have you got playing on your favorite summer playlist right now? I've been listening to a lot of classic rock, a lot of 70s and 80s. Even if you're not going on vacation, summer is all about that vacation state of mind. And so whether you want to listen to those favorite tunes on repeat or you just need to retreat inside your own head for a little bit, it's so much fun to create your own summer soundtrack. And I like to do that by popping in my Raycon wireless earbuds. There's just so much going on all summer, and sometimes you need some upbeat music to just pump you up before you go out and hit the beach with some friends or head over to a family barbecue, or maybe you want to relax a little bit with some calmer music, guided meditation. No matter what it is, if you're taking your earbuds on the go with you, maybe to the gym, like I said, out for a jog or a walk, or maybe you're just relaxing at home and you want some great tunes. I love to listen to music while I'm in the kitchen working, whether I'm cleaning or whether I'm cooking. baking, that kind of thing. So let me tell you, having your Raycon wireless earbuds is a great way to do that. They are the best way to listen to your music. You can use the earbud tap functions to toggle between 3 customizable sound profiles, noise isolation, and awareness mode, which allows some environmental sounds in so that you can still kind of hear what's going on around you if you want. Raycons have a 32-hour battery life, including 8 hours of playtime, so you can really listen to what you want, when you want, for a really long time. They come with custom gel tips for the most comfortable in-ear fit. That's a big one for me. In-ear earbuds and gel tips are typically difficult to fit inside my ear so that they fit and stay in my ear. Have not had an issue with my Raycons at all. And they start at just half the price of other premium audio brands, but they sound just as good, if not better. Raycons come with a 30-day happiness guarantee, so you really can't lose. So you can create your own soundtrack with Raycon. And right now, Canadiens Connection listeners can get 15% off their Raycon order at buyraycon.com/THPN. Really, this is an incentive just for listeners of the Canadiens Connection. We want you to take advantage of this offer. So again, that's buyraycon.com/THPN to save 15% on Raycons. buyraycon.com/THPN.
And welcome back to episode 257 of the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget you can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit our website at canadiensconnection.fm. And of course, we always encourage you to drop us a text on the Rocket Sports text line. That is 5853-ROCKET, 5853-ROCKET. We always want to hear from you. And you know full well that we will sometimes pick out some of your best comments and read them on the air, which we're going to do in just a little bit. But first, we want to give you what you need to know from the Rocket Sports team across all of our platforms for this week. We've mentioned it before. We'll say it again. New for this upcoming season, the Hockey News has released team-specific websites for all 32 franchises in the NHL. And Rick Stevens has been named the site editor for the Montreal team site, which means he's responsible for all the content that goes there and pulls content from his Rocket Sports correspondence as well. So all of our coverage can be found this season and right now at thn.com/Montreal. You want to bookmark that all season long. And actually, Rick had a feature there this week, a little bit of an analysis and an opinion piece about after the Jeff Petry trades. How are the Montreal Canadiens better?
Yeah, that's a little bit of what we talked about today, but getting into a little bit more detail if you want to read that and other content. And as Amy said, all of the Canadiens coverage, whether it's the Canadiens, whether it's the Laval Rocket, Trois-Rivières, all prospects, all in one place at thn.com/Montreal.
Absolutely. Of course, some of you may be listening to this podcast on our YouTube channel, and if you're not listening to this podcast via YouTube, well then, scurry on over to youtube.com/allhabs and tap that subscribe button and notification bell. Not only does the Canadiens Connection podcast get released every Monday on YouTube, I also host a weekly show there called Habs Hockey Report. It comes out on Thursdays. And I had my own things to say about the Jeff Petry trade. In fact, the name of this week's episode was Jeff Petry. Was this flip a flop?
I love that title.
Was this flip a flop?
Yeah. Good question.
Watch the episode. Comment. Let me know what you think. I had my own question to ask fans in that one. Check that out. And be sure you subscribe at All Habs on YouTube. youtube.com/allhabs.
And while you're there, while you're listening, you might as well leave a comment.
Yeah.
Like the video that you watch. Leave a comment. Matthew left a comment a couple of days ago on the episode called "Sounding Off on a Big Hockey Debate." That was the where we talked about enforcers and fighting. And Matthew says, "Best Habs hockey podcast."
Wow.
For
Thank
the
you.
Canadiens connection. Thank you, Matthew. That's terrific. And we're glad to hear that it's your favorite, that the Canadiens connection is your favorite Habs hockey podcast.
We appreciate that. So let us hear from all of you. Always, please comment, like, and share the videos on YouTube. It just helps us reach a bigger audience. And it tells YouTube, hey, we like this kind of content and we want to see more of it. Also, be sure to subscribe to both this podcast, CanadiensConnection.fm, as well as the Press Zone podcast. That's the one I host each and every Tuesday, focusing on the Laval Rocket, which Patrick Williams also joins us to talk about AHL league-wide news as well. You can find that at thepresszone.fm. And hey,
Seems I got an invitation this week.
at sneak peek, the band is back together because
Yeah.
Rick Stevens is also going to be joining me as well as Patrick on Tuesday. So the three of us will be on the Press Zone
that'll
this
be
coming
fun.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
You won't want to miss that. Also, we've already started receiving applications from folks via our Join Our Team tab over at habshockeyreport.com. If you are interested in joining the Rocket Sports team for this upcoming season in any capacity, there's lots of different ways that you can participate and be involved with the Rocket Sports team. And all you have to do is fill out, there's an online form for you to fill out. It makes it really easy for you to do. And you can find that at the Join Our Team tab by visiting habshockeyreport.com. Now, this week, we're continuing our series of getting to know our current Rocket Sports Media contributors. And so Michael Spinella sat down with Nathan this week to discuss his journey to becoming a Habs fan and why he joined the Rocket Sports team.
Thanks, guys, and I would like to welcome one of our Rocket Sports contributors, Nathan McCracken, to the show. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Michael. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to be with us. So every now and then we like to do a get to know you kind of a segment, get to know some of the people behind Rocket Sports. I know you joined, what's it been, like about a year ago? So I guess my first question for you, how did you find out about this opportunity, and what is it that you do to contribute?
Yeah, so how I found the opportunity at Rocket Sports is actually I started listening to the podcast in like the winter of 2021. And got to, listen to you guys and got to know how you guys operate and talk about, Montreal Canadiens and some beautiful insight about, how the Canadiens are doing. But I came up with the opportunity about last summer, I think August. You guys were looking to add some help to the team, and I applied, and Rocket Sports ended up hiring me in September of 2022.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. What exactly is it that you do for contributing?
So what I do is I'm on I'm promoting all our content on Facebook and, talking to fans and, being able to, post on all different different groups for our stuff we do. So, I just contribute through like the Facebook and, talk to the fans and promote everything through Facebook.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. It sounds like you might have some kind of a sales or customer servicey type background. What is it that you do outside of Rocket Sports?
Yeah, so actually what I do in the background is I'm actually a sales manager for Cogeco. It's like internet TV home phone service. I run a sales team of like 30 people, and we're able to promote internet TV home phone and get everybody a great deal on those telecom things, and I just manage the sales team as well.
I guess in a weird way, you allow people to watch the Montreal Canadiens games when they are being broadcasted, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in a way I do that for sure.
Right. So did you grow up a fan of the Montreal Canadiens? Is there like some way that you became a fan? Was it just your family's all Habs fans, or how did that happen?
Well, how that happened is actually I didn't start off being a Habs fan. Actually, when I was a little kid, I was living in BC. And I really enjoyed following the Vancouver Canucks when I was like 8 or 9 years old. But it wasn't until I moved to Ontario in 2006 and I was like, well, I want to follow a team that's closer to me, and I ended up following the Montreal Canadiens. I did my research, and I just I really enjoyed how the Habs have been able to build the environment they're in, and have the team they have. So I started doing that in 2006 and never looked back. Always been cheering on the Habs since then.
You ended up in Ontario. You decided to follow a team that's nearby, and you didn't pick Toronto or Ottawa. You went with Montreal. So good choice. Good choice.
yeah, exactly.
Was there a particular favorite player that you followed a lot growing up?
Yeah, honestly, like it was like Alex Kovalev. I'm pretty sure he came in there 2008, I believe, when he came to Montreal, and I really liked like his skill and his way he can put the puck in the net and just his all around sportsmanship on the team. So one of my favorite players is Alex Kovalev, but then falling in love with Carey Price when he first came on was another player I followed.
Yeah, nice picks for sure. And was this back when you were in BC that those became your favorite players, or was there someone else that you followed a little bit more in BC?
To be honest, I was a little young to really be like following anyone out like from when I was living out in BC. It wasn't really until I moved to Ontario and I did my research on the team and started liking those players.
Mm-hmm. So where in Ontario did you end up moving, and do you have a lot of Habs fans in that area too?
I moved to Fort Erie, Ontario. It's 15 minutes south of Niagara Falls. And honestly speaking, there's not many Habs fans that I've been able to see. That's mostly Toronto fans, to be honest. And
how do you find that, being surrounded by Toronto fans all the time? Are you faring well? Do you get in a lot of arguments, or how does that go for you?
Sometimes I just got to watch what I say. Sometimes, being a Habs fan and Toronto being our rival, I just got to watch what I say sometimes because I'm outnumbered most days. Yeah, I can understand that completely. Have you had a chance to attend a live Habs game? And was it like here in Montreal at Bell Center, or would it have been in Toronto? So actually, I've been to 4 Habs games. I moved back out west in 2016, and I was there till about 2020. But I was able to see the Habs play the Canucks every year from 2016 to 2020. So I'm yet to go to the Bell Center to watch a game, but that's my next move. Oh wow! How did you find that going to a game out west like that? The atmosphere must have been really cool. Oh, it was a sea of red everywhere. Like, it was more Habs fans than Canucks fans every game we showed up, and the energy was it was lively for sure. It was an amazing feeling. Oh, for real? Lots of Habs fans out that way. I wouldn't have realized that. Yeah, it was a lot. There's a lot out there for sure. Mm-hmm. I guess taking a look at a little bit more into your fandom here, do you have a favorite piece of Habs or hockey related memorabilia? Honestly, I actually have a lot of like just Montreal Canadiens stuff in general. Like I have like jerseys, hats, license plate cover, everything for my car. I don't really have a favorite. I just anything Montreal Canadiens I'll buy and put in my room or anywhere in my house. Mm-hmm. Like on those jerseys, do you have any nameplates on the back? Actually, I don't have any specific names. I have my name and then I have a couple blanks. But my next jersey I want to get is like Suzuki and Caulfield. The young players that we have in our system now. Yeah, that seems like a safe choice. I always worry with that stuff that the moment I buy a jersey, they'll be traded or they'll leave somehow. So I think putting your own name or leaving it blank is a good way to go. Also, Suzuki Caulfield, still pretty young, so that's probably a safe bet for you. Oh, yeah, for sure. No, it is, for sure. Well, Nathan, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on here, and it was really nice to get to know you. I know our listeners and some of my colleagues will enjoy listening back to this and getting to know you as well. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Oh, no, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope you have yourself a great day as well.
Well, that was a terrific interview. Thanks for doing that, Michael. And thanks to Nathan. Nathan's our social media specialist. He's been with us a year. He's very good at what he does. And we have a very talented team, multi-talented team from all over Canada and the U.S. who contribute and want to be a part of the Rocket Sports team and love the Montreal Canadiens. And so if you want to be one of those and part of our team, please follow the instructions that Amy gave you earlier and apply to join our team.
Don't forget, we want to hear your answer to our Canadiens Connection question of the week. What do you think was the best player addition and or deletion to the roster in this offseason? Send us a text at the Rocket Sports text line, 5853-ROCKET, or leave us a comment at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or when this episode comes out on YouTube on Monday. You can leave us a comment there as well. Be sure to let us know what you think the best player addition or deletion for the roster was. In terms of, Rick mentioned that we had that terrific comment about the podcast on YouTube from the latest Canadiens Connection episode from last week, where Rick and Michael were talking about enforcers and the hot debate of whether or not fighting in hockey is still a necessary part of the game. There were a boatload of comments on Facebook off of that particular episode, and so we've picked out a handful of them to read and acknowledge. And Rick, I think you're going to start with a message from Art.
Yeah, there are fans, hockey fans, certainly Canadiens fans, but hockey fans of all kind, who have really strong opinions on the issue of fighting. And so we had comments on Twitter, now called X, on Facebook, and via our text line. The phone was ringing off the hook. Can you say that anymore? You can't say that
I'm still
anymore.
going to. I'm still going to say that till the day I die, and I'm still going to call it Twitter till the day I die. So
we're going to focus. We're going to focus on the comments that came in via Facebook this week. The first from Art. Art's in Barrie, Ontario, and is a Habs fan, and he says, I was born in 1951, and there were goons or players that were hired strictly for the purpose of fighting. I remember in the 60s and 70s going to see on Sunday night the junior Canadiens who played in the OHA then. Good hockey, but talk about brawls and bench clearing brawls. But the time has changed. The game's much faster, and most of the players are bigger. But still, protection is needed for the much highly talented players, McDavid and so on. So yes, fighting will go on. And I think there's nothing wrong with what most fighters, because they are more talented than the goons back in the day.
Okay, all right. Prabjot from Edmonton, Alberta says yes, meaning so it's answering the question, is fighting in hockey still a necessary part of the game? Prabjot says yes, but you can eliminate bench clearing brawls. If you eliminate fighting altogether, star players will continue to get hurt. The stick work may cause more serious injuries. Pietrangelo wouldn't have dared to attempt a two-handed slash on Draisaitl if the NHL would allow enforcers to do their jobs. And that's a good point.
It is. Don from Fort Erie, Ontario. Nathan's also from Fort Erie. But Don from Fort Erie says, in order for fighting to be removed from hockey, first, the officiating needs to be done much more effectively. If an official will not hold a dirty player accountable, then players have no choice but to deal with it themselves. And I think that's an excellent point, is some of the vigilante justice, the justice on ice, is because a lot of things get missed by the officials.
Absolutely. Finally, Michael from Labrador City in Newfoundland says, yes, always has been part of the game, and if it's taken out of the game, there will be more dirty hits. And I think that kind of goes along with what Don was just saying too a little bit there. If you take that aspect out, players are going to take it upon themselves, and things are going to get chippier than they need to be.
We had all kinds of comments. So we had comments of folks referencing CTE. We mentioned the research on that and how that's been connected to the concussions have been connected to fighting. Although Gary Bettman doesn't want to admit that. And so we had lots and lots of different comments. This was an email from our dear friend Dino and Gatineau, and I'll read it as is.
Perfect.
Slou bien, merci pour le podcast. Wow, what a topic. Being fighting in the QMJHL is his subject line. Now, where shall I start and how to end? Rick, I checked out your top 5, and he's referring to, I did the top 5, and this can be found also on our website on the Hockey News, thn.com/Montreal. I did the top 5 enforcers of all time for the Montreal Canadiens. Check that out if you missed it. So Dino says, I checked out your top 5, Rick. Exemplary work, Rick. Exemplary. Honorable mention to the Rocket, which I had in the article. He had no one to defend him. He did it for himself and his teammates. Incredible and true. Love all those guys, Rick. Would have everyone on my team. They sacrifice self to defend their teammates. That's the highest honor. Even those you mentioned in the preamble, and I mentioned Terry Harper, Bouchard, Larry Robinson, Riseborough, etc. They are building blocks for life. Now, the tough part. Do we continue to allow it in junior hockey? In my humble estimation, I would say no. There's zero tolerance for violence, and fighting is violent. Aggressive play? Okay. Contact? Okay. Physicality? Okay. Intimidation? Okay to a degree. Cheap shots? Not okay. Using fighting to eliminate cheap shots? Putting your fist to the face of another is not the answer. Standing up for a mate is primordial. But if we use violence in retribution, what has been achieved? The violent aspects of hockey need to be addressed at the root. Our culture, the culture of the game, from Atom to Pee Wee to Bantam to Midget to Junior, etc. Aggression and violence has been tolerated, part of our culture. Change our culture, change our attitudes, and then change the game. We're human. We want to win, at times at all costs. Isolated acts that cross the line may be present, but as long as it's the exception and not the rule. So in my opinion, fighting in the QMJHL, no, that's a good call. And he says, P.S., think of poor Johnny Kordic. It didn't have to be that way, and we know the tragic story of John Kordic, who appeared in my top 5 list of enforcers. So we really appreciate Dino, who took the time to articulate his thoughts and send us an email. If you have an email to send it to hello@rocketsportsmedia.com.
And we always love to hear from you, no matter how you reach out to us. Our fans, it's such a passionate fan base, as we've said before. You've got so many opinions and perspectives. We always love to hear all of them, and so send them in. Don't forget, if you are heading out to Lasso Montreal on Saturday night, have a great time. Be safe. Next Saturday, of course, we'll be back with another episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. And hey, I'll be back.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah, I get to come back again next week. So thanks for having me this week. I look forward to being back again next week. Don't forget to subscribe to the Canadiens Connection on your favorite podcast app. Share it on social media. And we'll see you back here again next Saturday for another exciting episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Rocket Sports.